There's something about the grand reveal for the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park that gets me every time. Alan Grant taking off the sunglasses, Ellie nerding out so hard about a plant that she misses the massive dinosaur next to her, all of the shocked expressions, Ian Malcolm making my channel not safe for work.
You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
Which is what all of you will be saying when this deck perspective is done. I was thrilled when Alien Alan Paleontologist was announced as a card. Not only does the card mechanic match the lore, but the artwork is a beautiful reminder of two actors who set my young imagination on fire. I had to build this deck. Admittedly, there is a strong pull in the dinosaur tribal direction. There's something that doesn't feel very natural about unearthing a Phyrexian Praetor in Jurassic Park. Unfortunately, the deck is hard focused on getting out big beaters and powerful effects cheaply, and the number of impactful dinosaur cards is actually quite limited without the addition of red. If you're interested in running a dinosaur tribal strategy, I can certainly recommend something like Atla Palani, but our current commander is off the table. There's just way too many 2 to 4 mana dinosaurs that we'll have to play, and they don't really forward our strategy in the same way a 9 to 10 drop will. And we'll have plenty of those lower CMC dinos in our list if we went that route. If we focus on getting in the good stuff, our game plan will generally be enjoyable, as it becomes a puzzle of getting something big into the yard, followed by Ellie and Alan's ability. This brings me to the problems with the deck. Ellie and Alan are asking us to do multiple different things in order to benefit off of their ability. First, we can't even activate them unless we have cards in the graveyard. So step 1 is to fill up the yard, but unfortunately we're not in black, which makes this more difficult. Second, we then need to make sure that we're hitting something desirable off the top, which now that becomes a priority to include various forms of top deck manipulation. And third, our commander is 5 CMC, which may not seem like a big deal, but I play Atla Palani, and I can tell you even 4 CMC is a big deal. This is because we want our commander on the board as soon as possible to get the Discover train rolling. And remember, Ellie and Alan, just like Atla Palani, is a tap ability. And after all this, we still aren't guaranteed a good hit because we could discover into a low CMC artifact, sorcery, instant, enchantment. Atla Palani does not have this issue because she pulls cards off the top until we hit a creature only. It makes her gameplay much more consistent than what ours may otherwise be. This is starting to feel like an Atla Palani shill piece. Why even play this commander then? Truthfully, I think it's partially for the novelty, but also because you get access to blue, and access to blue could be a big deal. If you wanted to run a higher power deck list, for instance, you can certainly put in the heavy hitting counter spells. And also with the addition of blue, your draw engine is just going to be overall smoother. But the key difference is that we can discover our way into big non-creature spells. This includes our big enchantment Omniscience, but also includes things like Last March of the Ents. In my deck list, I didn't lean heavily into this aspect, but I think it is worth exploring, no pun intended. I also want to note that I'm not running any counter spells. In my eyes, this deck list is all about the go big or go home type of strategy, or the hitting it big strategy like Ellie and Alan stumbling across a complete Velociraptor skeleton despite running so low on funding. Counter spells dilute our pool of cards to hit, and this also cuts into our other pieces of card draw and consistency that we can use to set up the top of the deck. I would be so salty if I exiled a 13 CMC creature to only get a 2 mana counter spell that I can't even cast for free. On the topic of blue, let's talk about some of the creatures we'll be including. My deck list includes Ancient Silver Dragon, Astral Dragon, Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur, and Nezahal Primal Tide. But unfortunately, the list of big blue baddies stops there, as the green and white creatures tend to outshine in the big stompy department. Outside of Omniscience, the remainder of our blue cards are included for one purpose: setting up our strategy. Just take a look at the instant and sorcery categories, chocked full of filtering draw, scry, surveil, and 2 interesting includes that I find are particularly useful in this deck: Tygam, Scheming, and Contingency Plans. Both are 2 mana sorcery speed to look at the top 5 cards of the deck. Then we can decide to return any number of them to the top, or place directly into the graveyard. 2 mana to dig 5 deep is a pretty decent rate. It allows us to set up the graveyard in the early game by just dumping all 5 into the yard, but then it gets even better when we use it with Ellie and Alan already on the battlefield, allowing us to curate the top card of the deck while simultaneously giving ourselves a great exile target in the graveyard. Don't sleep on these very cheap pickups. Next, let's talk about the great white pickups for this deck. Unfortunately, white is primarily in our deck for 2 reasons. One is protection, and the other is excellent single target removal. Even our creature cards like Avacyn primarily exist to give our board just resilience, and that's it. I do want to point out a sleeper pick, however, which I don't see played in nearly as many decks as I think it deserves to be in. Dragonlord Dromoka is played in dragon decks reliably, but when it comes to branching out from a dragon tribal strategy, it's sorely missed. For example, in Atla Palani, it's only in about 6, maybe 7% of all decks. Because we're only able to activate our commander at sorcery speed, having some built-in protection like this can actually go a very long way. Not to mention it's also a 5/7 flyer, life-linking creature. Give this card a try. If white exists to protect and blue exists for deck consistency, that must mean that our green cards are there for payoffs, right? Well, mostly, but there are some includes that I wanted to expand on further because of how important they become to our strategy. First, the tutors, such as Worldly Tutor and Congregation at Dawn. Both can be used at instant speed in response to our commander's activation, and once they resolve with our commander, we should be able to effectively lock up the game. Just imagine a tutored up Void Winnower, Dragonlord Dromoka, Apex Devastator, you name it. We also get access to one of the better draw engines in the game, Sylvan Library, which can not only draw us, especially early, but also set up the top of the deck for our commander. The same goes for a sneaky include, Miri's Guile, stacking up draws early, but also pumping out big threats in the mid to late game. And an enchantment that I wouldn't actually mind hitting off the top with our commander's ability, Lurking Predators. I will admit, not the most effective card to run, but it certainly causes amazing table dynamics, as everyone tiptoes around trying to find an answer before the huge creature gets ripped off the top. I always love playing this in my 4-pods. This just leaves our plethora of big green and colorless creature threats. Many of them are to be expected. The Eldrazi Titans, mana accelerators like Nyx Bloom, stacks pieces like Vorinclex, more cheating with Kodama, Blightsteel Infect, the list goes on. Again, this deck exists for one purpose, discovering those big threats that lie hidden in the depths of our library. And I think now is as good a time as ever to stress that we absolutely need a higher creature count despite the CMC, because this is the prerequisite for our commander. If you choose to play a heavier spells theme instead of creatures theme, just know that you'll still need plenty of high CMC creatures to make that strategy work. That's why I went the route of Creatures Matter, because I felt too many high CMC sorceries, enchantments, instants, or artifacts would really muddle the deck to a point it never worked as intended. On the basis of artifacts, I did want to discuss one of my includes, which is Chromatic Orrery. Why include this card? There's only one creature in my list that's actually 6 CMC, so it got me thinking, what are some 7 mana artifacts that are powerful that I would rather include than just another Cultivate? Imagine the scenario where you activate Ellie and Alan, only to hit a Migration Path or a Cultivate. You know, I like the cards, but it feels bad. Cards like the Orrery have more potential to keep you in the game. Imagine you untap with, let's say, 6 mana available to you, you activate your commander, and then you hit the Orrery off the top. Now, all of a sudden, you have 11 mana in any combination of colors, which will often be able to cast anything you're holding in hand. You can do this thought experiment with nearly any other ramp card. Would you rather have a Crop Rotation, a Burgeoning, an Exploration? Of course not. You want the card that when hitting it on curve or hitting it off the top with Ellie and Alan feels like you just won the lottery. It just doesn't make a ton of sense to run the other cards when you start to think through it. And now for a nombo that I've seen included in far too many lists online, Worldspine Worm. Now the worm is very attractive, at least as an exile target in the graveyard. But therein lies the problem. Worldspine Worm sees itself entering the graveyard, and then will reshuffle itself back into the deck, which means Ellie and Alan will not have a chance to exile it. You can technically interact with the card because it will go on the stack as it's a triggered ability with it going into the graveyard, but our commander only plays at sorcery speed. I can't recommend this card, so please just cut it from your list. Sure, we're running cards like Emrakul and Blightsteel, which do have similar effects, but they actually have a much higher chance of ending the game. Worldspine Worm's death trigger will fill your board, but I don't see this as enough of an upside to include it as opposed to the Emrakul and Blightsteel. And just like that, our deck list is complete. As I stated at the very beginning, if you're looking for a more dinosaur heavy build, I would encourage you to use some caution, as I don't think you'll really hit the same way that my deck list will. I think that you'll find yourself stuck with a lot of the smaller dinos and have very few payoffs in the late game. As always, you can find this deck and my other deck lists linked down below my Archideck profile. If you want to support me and what I'm doing here, the best way by far is to subscribe. Your subscription goes a long way to ensuring the future health and performance of the channel. This also means that you get notified first upon my new releases and can get access to my custom deck lists as soon as possible. I hope you stick around for all future uploads. Support my addiction so I can continue supporting your addiction. I've been Kyle, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.